The train had long vanished into the horizon, leaving behind only the echo of its wheels and the faint trembling of the wooden platform. Early morning fog rolled across the tracks, swallowing the quiet little station in a pale, ghostly haze. It was in that stillness that she opened her eyes. At first, she didn't understand where she was. The chill bit her skin, the hard bench beneath her felt unfamiliar, and her mind a blank white sheet gave her nothing in return. She inhaled sharply. The scent of iron rails, dust, and distant pine filled her lungs. She blinked. She heard the soft whimpering. She looked down, and her heart nearly stopped. A baby lay curled in her arms, wrapped in a thin gray blanket. Tiny fists waved weakly, searching for warmth. Panic surged through her. She pulled the infant close, as if instinct alone told her how to hold a child. But questions slammed into her with dizzying force. Whose baby is this? Why am I holding it? Who am I? The last question hurt the most. No matter how hard she tried to reach into the fog of her mind, nothing came. Not a name, not a face, not a memory of her past. She could barely remember breathing before this moment. A gust of cold wind swept across the platform, making her shiver. The baby fussed louder. She swallowed the rising fear and forced herself to look around. The station was empty, the small ticket booth locked, the signboard hanging crooked from a rusted nail. No townsfolk, no passengers, not even a stray dog. She was utterly alone, or so she thought. A soft thud echoed behind her bootsteps. Slow, steady, unhurried, she stiffened, holding the baby tighter. Her pulse hammered as a tall shadow emerged from the fog. A cowboy. He stopped several feet away, keeping his hands visible as though he sensed the fear that radiated off her. He was broad-shouldered, dressed in worn denim and a dust-coated coat. His hat was pulled low, hiding most of his expression. But what she could see his jawline, the hint of a scar on his cheek, was carved with quiet strength. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, watching her with calm, unreadable eyes. Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The baby whimpered again, and she adjusted her grip awkwardly. He didn't answer right away. In fact, he didn't answer at all, not with words. Instead, he stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, like one would approach a frightened animal. She should have backed away. Every instinct screamed danger, but something about the stillness in his gaze held her rooted. He pointed first at the blanket, then at the tracks. A silent question. She understood what he was asking. Was she left here? Had she come from the train? Her throat tightened. "I don't know. I don't remember anything." The cowboy's brows drew together. A flicker of concern crossed his eyes. Just a flicker, but enough to make her chest loosen slightly. A distant horn blew, the morning train whistle. Soon the sheriff would arrive, asking questions she couldn't answer. Questions that might take the baby away if she couldn't even say her own name. The cowboy must have realized that too. Without warning, he took a step closer and tipped his hat up just enough for her to see the honesty in his gaze. His voice, low and rough from disuse, finally broke the silence. "You'll need a name," he said, "and you do now." It wasn't a threat, it was a promise, a lifeline thrown to a drowning stranger. And in that moment, lost, terrified, nameless, she grabbed hold. Not knowing it would change both their fates forever. The baby's soft cries filled the quiet station as she stared at the cowboy, unsure whether to run or cling to the only person who seemed to understand the danger she couldn't name. His words echoed in her ears. "You'll need a name, and you do now." He spoke like a man who rarely wasted breath, every syllable heavy with intention. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, another sound-distant hoofbeats and wagon wheels rolled through the fog. The cowboy's posture shifted, subtle but unmistakable. His shoulders tensed, his eyes hardened. Whatever, or whoever was approaching, he didn't trust it. He crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "You trust me?" he asked quietly. She almost said no. She didn't know him. She didn't know herself. But when she glanced down at the fragile baby in her arms, her fear sharpened into something fierce. Whoever left her at this station hadn't intended safety. She could feel it in her bones. Her throat tightened. "I don't know. But I need help." For the first time, his expression softened, just barely. He gave one short nod. He moved swiftly then, shrugging out of his long coat and draping it over her shoulders and the baby. The scent of leather and cedar wrapped around her, warming the places her thin dress could not. He lifted the collar slightly. To hide her face, keep the baby close. Don't speak unless I tell you, he murmured. And whatever happens, stay beside me. She clutched the infant tighter and nodded. Moments later, a sheriff's wagon rolled through the mist and stopped. At the platform, Sheriff Rourkebrod, red-faced and always suspicious, stepped down with 2 deputies behind him. His sharp eyes landed on the cowboy immediately. "Well now," the sheriff drawled. "Didn't expect to see you here, Hunter." Hunter. So that was the silent cowboy's name. Hunter didn't answer, and the sheriff smirked at the predictable silence. Then the sheriff saw her. A woman with a baby. A stranger. No luggage. No escort. Wrapped in the coat of a man known for trusting no one. Suspicion sparked instantly. "Who's this?" the sheriff asked, stepping closer. Her heart lurched. Her grip tightened on the baby. She felt Hunter's hand gently touch her arm steadying, warning her to stay still. "She's with me," Hunter said simply. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "With you? Since when do you bring home strays?" Hunter didn't flinch. "Since today," Rourke snorted, "in her name." This was the moment. If she hesitated, she stuttered, questions would come. Questions she couldn't answer. Questions that could take the baby from her, or worse, expose her to whoever had left her here. Hunter didn't give her the chance to panic. "My wife," he said. The world froze. She stared at him, breath trapped in her chest, stunned by the quiet weight of the words. "Wife," he said it without hesitation, without embarrassment, without looking at her for approval. He said it to shield her, to claim her, to make anyone think twice before prying. The sheriff blinked, surprised. "Your wife? Since when the hell? Since last night, Hunter." Cut in, his tone firm as steel. "We didn't announce it yet." Rourke looked between the 2 of them. Her flushed cheeks could pass for embarrassment. The baby sleeping against her chest made the lie believable, and Hunter silent, steady Hunter, wasn't a man known for dishonesty. After a long moment, the sheriff shrugged. "Fine. Congratulations." "I suppose." Hunter nodded once in acknowledgement. The deputies moved on, disinterested. The sheriff, however, narrowed his eyes slightly, as if sensing something was off, but he said nothing more. Once they left, Hunter gently touched her elbow. "We need to go," he murmured. "More questions will come if we stay." She let him guide her off the platform, toward his horse, her mind spinning. She still had no name, no past, no answers. But she had one thing she hadn't had an hour ago: protection. And for reasons she couldn't explain, she trusted the silent cowboy more with every breath. They left the train station behind, moving quickly along the dirt path leading toward the edge of town. Hunter walked beside her, steady and silent, while she carried the baby snugly under his coat. The chill morning air bit at her cheeks, but the larger cold was inside her fear of the unknown, of the emptiness where her memories should have been. When they reached Hunter's horse, the animal lifted its head and snorted softly in greeting. Hunter paused before helping her mount, studying her with calm eyes that somehow saw deeper than her trembling surface. "You cold?" he asked. She shook her head, though she was freezing. What she was truly afraid of was falling apart. "I'm fine," Hunter didn't argue. He lifted her carefully onto the horse's back, making sure the baby was secure between her arms. His gentleness startled her more than any danger so far. Men with hands that large and scarred usually weren't tender by nature, but his touch was steady, protective. Once mounted behind her, he took the reins and nudged the horse forward. As they rode, she felt the warmth of his chest at her back and the quiet strength in the arm he kept around her, not too tight, but firm enough to let her know she wasn't alone. They rode past the small cluster of wooden shops that made up the town. A few townsfolk turned to look. News traveled fast out here. Hunter never brought anyone home, certainly not a wife with a newborn. Whispers began instantly. "That's Hunter's woman. He never said he got married. And that baby, Lord save us, who is she?" She shrank into herself, wishing she could disappear. Hunter sensed it. "Don't listen," he murmured. "They talk 'cause they're bored." But she kept her head low, her mind a whirlwind. Wife the sheriff had believed it. So had these strangers. But the lie couldn't last forever. She needed a name at the very least. Finally, when they had left the murmuring town behind and were Riding across open land, she found the courage to speak. "You told the sheriff, I'm your wife," she said quietly. Was the cleanest way to keep him off us. Us, the word warmed her unexpectedly. "And my name," she whispered. Hunter was quiet for a moment. The rhythmic clop of hooves filled the silence. He guided the horse up a gentle slope, the horizon opening into a wide expanse of golden grasslands and distant mountains. A breathtaking view, one she might have appreciated if her identity weren't a complete blank. Then he said, "Grace." She turned her head slightly. "Grace, you look like one," he said simply. Soft voice, steady hands. "And you're holding that baby like you were born to." The name wrapped around her like the coat on her shoulders, unexpected but strangely fitting. "Grace," she repeated. The word trembled on her lips. "Do you think it was my real name?" Hunter's arm tightened slightly around her, steadying her. "Doesn't matter, till you remember who you were. This'll protect you." She nodded, though a part of her whispered that maybe she didn't want to remember. Maybe her past held the reason she woke up alone and nameless with a crying baby. "Thank you," she said softly. Hunter didn't respond with words. He just nudged the horse faster, putting more distance between them and the station as they rode deeper into wilderness. She looked down at the tiny sleeping face nestled against her chest. If she was Grace now, then who was this baby? Her baby? Someone else's? A burden? A blessing? The question weighed on her heart like a stone. By the time Hunter's ranch came into view, her solitary house standing strong against the vast silence, one truth had settled deep inside her. Whatever her past was, it wasn't safe. And this cowboy, silent as he was, might be the only person standing between her and whatever danger was hunting her. The ranch came into view slowly, rising from the landscape like a quiet promise. A sturdy wooden house, weathered by wind and time, a barn standing solid beside it, fenced pastures stretching out toward the mountains. Smoke curled from the chimney thin, steady, familiar. It looked like the kind of place where nothing bad could reach you. But as Grace tightened her hold on the baby, she reminded herself that looks could deceive. She still didn't know this man, this silent cowboy who'd given her a name, a story, and now a place to hide. Hunter helped her down from the horse, his hands firm around her waist. She tried not to lean into him, tried not to want the stability he offered, but her legs trembled with exhaustion. "You all right?" he asked. Yes, she lied. He didn't push. Just nodded once, then lifted the reins and led the horse toward the barn. Grace followed, clutching the baby close as the cold wind cut across the open yard. Inside the barn, warmth washed over her, the smell of hay, leather, and horses wrapped around her like a blanket. Hunter unsaddled the horse with efficient movements, glancing at her only occasionally, as if gauging whether she might fall apart. "House is warm," he said finally. "Go on in. I'll feed him and be right behind you." She hesitated. "Don't want to be a burden." His hands stilled on the saddle. "You're not." The words were simple, but something in his tone, quiet, rough, almost vulnerable, made her throat tighten. She nodded and walked out of the barn, feet sinking into soft dirt. The house's wooden steps creaked as she climbed them. When she opened the door, heat from the fireplace greeted her instantly. The living room was simple, but cared for: patched curtains, polished floors, sturdy furniture. A woven blanket lay across the sofa, and boots lined up neatly by the door showed the habits of a man living alone. Grace felt suddenly small, fragile, out of place. What if he regretted bringing her here? What if, once she remembered who she was, she brought trouble to his door? She swallowed hard and moved deeper into the room. The baby stirred, fussing a little. She gently rocked him, though she didn't know if she was doing it right. Yet the tiny form relaxed against her, trusting her in a way she didn't trust herself. A creak at the doorway made her turn. Hunter stepped inside, removing his hat and hanging it on a hook. Without it, he looked younger, still strong, still serious, but softer around the edges. His hair was dark and slightly messy, his jaw shadowed with stubble. His eyes, though unreadable, held a strange kind of calm. He nodded toward the kitchen. "Water's warm if you need to wash up." Grace hesitated. This is your home. I don't want to intrude." Hunter looked at her for a long moment. "You're not intruding. You needed a place, and I don't mind the company." It was the closest thing to an admission she'd ever heard from him. Her cheeks warmed. He stepped closer, eyes flicking to the baby. "He hungry, I think so," she said helplessly. Hunter nodded. "Midwife in town can come tomorrow. She'll know what you need." "You think he's mine?" Grace whispered, fear tightening her chest. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out slowly, touching the baby's blanket with rough fingertips. "I think," he said, voice low, "someone wanted you to gone, and I think they ain't finished." A shiver ran down her spine. Hunter met her gaze. "But you're safe here. Long as you're under my roof, no one touches you." His quiet certainty soothed her in a way she couldn't explain. She exhaled, shakily, and nodded, for the first time since waking at the train station. She felt a flicker of something warm and grounding. Hope. Night settled over the ranch slowly, laying a dark velvet blanket across the plains. Grace sat near the fireplace, the baby resting in her lap, wrapped snugly in Hunter's large, well-worn coat. The fire crackled softly, its warmth soothing the ache in her bones. Yet inside her, nothing was calm. Shadows danced along the wooden walls, stretching and twisting like memories, trying to take shape. She stared into the flames, hoping the warmth would unlock something, anything from the empty space in her mind. Hunter moved quietly in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal. Every so often, she felt his eyes flick toward her, checking without checking, like he already accepted the responsibility of protecting her. Finally, she broke the silence. "Hunter, do you think I ran away from someone?" He didn't answer. Right away, he set down the kettle, then leaned against the counter, arms crossing over his chest. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. "You woke up with no name and a baby," he said quietly. "That don't happen unless a person's desperate or scared." Grace's throat tightened. She looked down at the tiny face sleeping. Against her, his little breaths rose and fell steadily, unaware of the storm that surrounded him. "I keep getting flashes," she whispered. "Smoke a man shouting, running through the dark, but it's all broken, like pieces that don't fit." Hunter approached slowly, pulling out the chair beside her, but not sitting. "Mademoiselle, come when they're ready. Don't force them." "But what if I don't want them to come?" Her voice shook. "What if I remember something terrible?" Hunter crouched down so he was level with her. The firelight softened his stern features, casting shadows in the lines of his face. "Grace, whatever you went through, you're here now. Baby's safe. You're safe." His voice lowered. "And I ain't letting anyone take that from you." The simple certainty in his words wrapped around her like a blanket, warming the cracks inside her, but the feeling didn't last long. The baby stirred, fussing again. Grace adjusted her hold, instinctively rocking him. The moment the tiny infant snuggled closer to her chest, something sharp stabbed through her mind. A memory, a flash, a scream. Firelight too bright, a man's hand grabbing her arm. A baby crying in the dark, her own voice hoarse, terrified begging. Gasped. Hunter was instantly alert. "Grace, I saw something," she whispered, trembling. "Someone was yelling. I think he wanted the baby. I was running." She couldn't finish. Tears spilled down her cheeks, dripping onto the baby's blanket. Hunter's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with a quiet, simmering anger knot. At her, but whoever had done this, he gently took the baby for the first time, surprising her. His large hands cradled the tiny body with unexpected gentleness. The baby blinked up at him, and something softened in Hunter's expression, though he said nothing. "You don't have to remember it all right now," he murmured. "We'll take it slow." She asked softly. Hunter looked at her steadily. "Ain't letting you face this alone." Her chest ached with a strange mix of fear and comfort. She didn't know what she'd done, who she'd angered, or why she'd been left for dead on a platform. But the shadows trailing her were real, growing sharper with every memory that returned. Hunter handed the baby back and stood slowly. "Eat something," he said gently. "You'll need your strength." She nodded, though her hands still trembled as he moved toward the window. Checking the dark horizon, she saw it. The man who barely spoke, the man who lived like a ghost, the man who claimed her with one quiet sentence. He was ready to fight. For her, for the baby, against whatever darkness her past held, and that truth solid and unshakable settled deep in her bones. She wasn't alone anymore. Morning came too soon. The sky was still pale when Grace awoke. her heart pounding from another night of broken, half-remembered dreams. The baby slept curled against her side, in the bed Hunter had insisted she take, though exhausted. The moment she opened her eyes, she felt it the same invisible pressure that had followed her since the station, or the memory of fear. She slipped out of bed, careful not to wake the baby, and walked to the window. The plains stretched out endlessly, painted in soft gold by the rising sun. It should have felt peaceful, but something unsettled her, a prickle at the back of her neck, a presence, a warning, like someone was searching, herself trying to shake the feeling. Downstairs, Hunter was already awake. She heard his boots on the wooden floor, the clinking of metal, the quiet preparation of a man who lived by routine. When she stepped into the kitchen, he was cleaning, a rifle at the table. The sight made her freeze. Hunter looked up immediately. "You all right?" She nodded weakly, but her eyes stayed fixed on the weapon. "Just making sure it's ready," he said calmly. "Nothing to worry about." But something in his tone said otherwise. Grace moved to the stove and poured herself a cup of warm water. "You think someone's looking for me?" It wasn't a question. Hunter didn't answer at first. He wiped the barrel clean, then set the rifle down. Leaning forward with his arms braced on the table, "Town's token," he said slowly. "Strangers rode in last night, asking 'bout a woman with a baby." Her breath caught. "What? Did they say?" "One claimed he was looking for his wife. Said she ran off with her child." Hunter's jaw tightened, but something in his eyes didn't match the story. Grace went cold. Pieces of her memories flashed like shattered glass running through the dark woods. Clutching the baby, a man's furious voice echoing behind her. She gripped the edge of the counter. "Did you tell him anything?" she whispered. Hunter's gaze hardened. "I don't talk to men who lie." His certainty steadied her for a moment, till the screen. Door creaked behind them. Footsteps on the porch. Hunter's hand reached for the rifle. Automatically, Grace's heartbeat thundered. She backed up, positioning herself between the door and the baby's cradle as instinct overtook fear. "Stay behind me," Hunter said quietly. But before she could respond, someone called out from outside. "Hunter, you home?" Hunter relaxed by a fraction. "It's Lucas," he murmured. He opened the door to reveal Lucas, the local ranch hand, and one of the few men Hunter tolerated. Lucas tipped his hat at Grace before lowering his voice to Hunter. "Those fellas from last night, they're still in town. Sheriff says they're sticking around a while." Hunter's expression turned to stone. Lucas continued. "One of 'em had a blanket. Said it belonged to the woman he's looking for. Sheriff described it." He nodded toward the cradle. "Matches that one." Grace's knees nearly buckled. The baby's blanket, the one she'd woken up holding. Hunter moved instantly, stepping closer to her. His voice steady but firm. "No one's talking you or that baby. They're looking for someone weak and scared. You ain't that." Grace's voice cracked. "But I don't remember anything." What if he is the father? What if I?" Hunter gently caught her shoulders. "You ran, Grace. Women don't run unless they're escaping something bad." His eyes held hers, dark and certain. "Listen to me," he said, low and powerful. "Whoever those men are, they ain't your family. And they ain't getting through me." A tremor ran through her, not of fear this time, but a deep, overwhelming trust she didn't fully understand. Lucas cleared his throat. "Hunter's right, but you best stay inside today." Then he lowered his voice further. "And Hunter, there's talk the strangers ain't alone. More riders headed this way." Grace's blood ran cold. Hunter's grip tightened protectively around her. The danger wasn't coming. It was already here. The tension in the house thickened like fog. Grace sat near the window with the baby in her arms, her heartbeat loud in her ears. Every sound outside, every hoofstep, every creak of wood felt like a threat. She kept the baby tucked close, listening to his tiny breaths, praying he wouldn't sense the fear tightening her chest. Hunter paced the living room slowly, checking the locks, checking the rifle, checking the view through the curtains. His movements were controlled, measured, but Grace could see the storm under the surface. This wasn't the calm of a quiet man. This was the quiet of a man preparing for war. "Tell me everything," he finally said. Grace swallowed hard. "I don't remember everything." "Tell me what you do." She closed her eyes, gripping the baby as the fragments of memory clawed. Their way forward. There was a room, a big one, a fire burning too hot, A man shouting. She paused, shaking. He grabbed me. He kept saying, I wasn't going anywhere. And the baby, her breath hitched. The baby was crying so hard, I tried to run. I slipped out a door, maybe a window. Everything after that is pieces. Hunter stepped closer. What did the man look like? She tried to focus, but her memories blurred. Tall, rough, hands a ring on his left finger. I remember that, and he smelled like whiskey. Hunter's jaw tightened. That was no husband looking for his wife. I know, she whispered. He lowered himself to her level, steady eyes holding her trembling ones. Grace, men like that don't chase a woman because they love her. They chase what they think they own. She shivered, and the baby. Hunter didn't speak at first. Then he said quietly, could be yours, could be theirs, could be someone else's. She felt sick. But whoever he is, Hunter continued, he ain't after you because he cares. He's after control. Power. You talkin' the baby embarrassed. Him, that type of man, don't forgive. Grace clutched the baby tighter, fear twisting inside her. Footsteps sounded outside again. Hunter stiffened and moved to the window. Grace followed with her eyes and froze. A small group of riders approached the ranch slowly, their silhouettes dark against the bright noon sun. 3 men, then 4, then 5. Her pulse quickened. Is it them? Hunter nodded. Looks like it, the baby whimpered, sensing the tension. Grace tried to soothe him, but her hands trembled too much. Hunter turned away from the window and moved to her side. Listen to me. You're going to the back room. There's a place under the floorboards. You stay there with the little one. Don't come out until I tell you. Her breath caught. Hunter, no, you can't face him alone. I've faced worse. His tone was calm, but there was steel in it. Grace shook her head, panic rising. They're dangerous. They'll kill you. Hunter looked directly into her eyes, and for the first time, she saw something besides calm sternness, something almost gentle. You're forgetting something important, he said quietly. What? You're not alone anymore, and neither am I. The words stunned her. He touched the baby's blanket, just a brief brush of his fingers, and something protective. Something fierce flared in his eyes. They want him, Hunter said. Have to go through me first. Grace's throat tightened. Why are you doing this? You owe me nothing. Hunter stopped, as if the question surprised him. He stood silent for a moment, choosing his words. Then, softly but firmly, he said, I made you a promise the second I gave you a name, and I don't break promises. Grace had no answer, only a rush of emotion she wasn't prepared to feel. Outside, men dismounted. Boots hit the dirt. Voices murmured. Hunter straightened, rifle in hand. Go, he whispered. Hide, protect the baby. Grace forced herself to her feet, every step torn between fear and helplessness. Before she slipped into the back room, she looked at him one last time. Hunter stood in the doorway, shoulders broad, jaw set, eyes cold with determination, a lone wall between her and a world full of men who wanted to take everything from her. And as the first knock thundered through the house, Grace realized he wasn't just protecting her, he was ready to claim her. The morning sun had barely cleared the horizon when a cloud of dust rose on the far end of the road leading to the ranch. Emma noticed it first while she was hanging laundry on the line, the baby cooing safely in his cradle nearby. At first, she thought it was a stray rider or a passing wagon. But when she saw Luke step out onto the porch, shoulders stiff, jaw tight, she knew this was no ordinary visitor. A chill settled in her chest. The rider slowed as he approached, dismounting with a fluid motion that spoke of long practice. He was tall, lean, with eyes too sharp to be friendly. His horse snorted, restless, as if it sensed the tension thickening the air. Morning, Luke, the stranger called, dusting his coat as he walked forward. Luke didn't return the greeting. His hand hovered near the butt of his holstered gun, not touching it, but close enough to send a message. Emma felt the instinctive urge to gather the baby and run inside. But something told her she needed to stand still, needed to understand who this man was. What do you want? Luke finally asked, voice low. The stranger flicked his eyes toward Emma, then to the baby, and a smirk tugged at his lips. Heard you've taken in some strays. Didn't think you'd had it in you. Emma felt her cheeks burn, but Luke stepped slightly in front of her still, protective. Say your piece, Luke growled. The man shrugged, just paying a friendly visit. Folks in town been talking. About that girl from the train station. About how you've been playing family. Emma's stomach twisted. Gossip. The one thing she feared more than anything. She imagined whispers, spreading like wildfire, the nameless girl, the baby that wasn't hers, the silent cowboy who took them in. She didn't need trouble knot after everything she had escaped. But Luke didn't flinch. You have something to say about it. The man's smirk vanished. You know why I'm here. You can't hide from your past. Not out here. Not anywhere. Past. The word jolted Emma. She turned to Luke, searching his face. But he kept his gaze locked on the stranger. You should leave, he said. Or what? I won't say it again. The silence that followed was so sharp it felt like a blade pressed against skin. Emma's pulse pounded as the two men stared each other down. Then, with a low chuckle, the stranger raised his hands in mock surrender. Fine, but we both know this isn't over. He mounted his horse, gave Emma one last assessing glance, and rode away. Emma let out a breath she didn't even realize she had been holding. Luke watched the rider disappear, his expression carved from stone. She stepped closer. Who was that? Luke hesitated long enough to make the answer matter. Someone I used to know. That was all he said before turning back toward. Emma followed slowly, her mind racing. She had secrets, shadows she'd been running from. But Luke, quiet, gentle Luke, had never once hinted at his own burdens. She had assumed he was a man untouched by trouble, a man whose silence meant peace. Now she wasn't so sure. Inside the house, the baby fussed, sensing the tension. Emma cradled him close, whispering soothing words, but her eyes drifted to Luke as he sat at the table, staring at nothing. He had protected her, defended her, stood between her and a man who clearly had a claim on his past, and for the first time, since the train station, Emma realized she wasn't the only one hiding from something. Something was coming for him, for her, for the baby, and this time she wouldn't be the one left behind. That evening, the ranch felt different, quieter, heavier, as if holding its breath. The stranger's visit had shaken something loose, and Emma could sense Luke retreating into himself as the sun dipped below the hills. He worked longer than usual, staying out in the barn long after the chores were done. Every time she thought he might return to the house, the dull scrape of tools or the thud of boots told her he was still keeping his distance. Emma put the baby to sleep, her hands moving automatically, though her heart tugged with questions she couldn't silence. The child curled peacefully against the quilt she'd sewn just days earlier, stitch by stitch. She had begun building a life she didn't realize she wanted. But lives built on secrets were fragile, and she knew too well how quickly they could crumble. Finally, when the lamps had been lit and the house stood warm against the encroaching night, Luke stepped inside. His shoulders sagged with exhaustion, not from work, but from something weightier: memory, regret, guilt. She couldn't tell which. Emma stood from her chair. Luke, she said softly, we need to talk. He froze. Even from across the room, she could see the flicker of resistance in his eyes. But after a long moment, he nodded and set his hat aside. They sat at the table, the silence between them thick. Emma braced herself, but Luke beat her to it. I owe you the truth, he said quietly, her breath caught. He didn't look at her as he spoke. His hands were clasped tightly together, knuckles pale. That man today, his name's Colt. We rode together years back, worked ranch to ranch. He got himself mixed up with the wrong crowd, folks who thought taking what they wanted was easier than earning it. Emma listened, still and attentive. I walked away from it, wanted a clean life, wanted something decent. A bitter smile tugged at his lips. Colt didn't, and he didn't forgive me for leaving. Emma mulled over his words. Is he dangerous? He can be, Luke admitted. If he thinks he's owed something. She inhaled sharply. And does he think you owe him? Luke, hesitate. No. He thinks I owe the men he rode with. Emma's brows knit. Why would you? Luke finally looked at her. Really looked at her. In his eyes, she saw the weight he carried. Because when I left, they lost someone they depended on. Someone who kept them in check. After I walked away, things got worse. A man died. Colt blames me. Emma's heart twisted. Luke, you didn't kill anyone. No, he whispered. But some men don't care about the truth. They care about blame. For a long moment, neither spoke. The house creaked as wind brushed against the walls. Somewhere outside, a lone coyote cried out. Its call threading through the dark dot, Emma reached across the table, laying her hand over his. She half expected him to pull away, but he didn't. "You protected me today," she said softly. "And the baby." "You didn't have to. I did," he said, voice rough. "Not because of duty, because I care." He swallowed hard, the admission almost painful for him. "But caring doesn't erase the danger I've brought to you." Emma shook her head. "You didn't bring danger. Colt did. And danger was already following me before I ever walked into your life." Luke's eyes softened with something like understanding or gratitude. "Maybe both. We're not alone anymore," she said. "Not you, not me, not him." She nodded toward the sleeping baby in the next room. "Whatever comes, we face it together." For the first time since the stranger's visit, Luke's shoulders eased. A breath escaped him, quiet but steady. The truth had come out, not all of it, perhaps, but enough to bind them closer rather than drive them apart. And as the shadows deepened around the ranch, one thing became clear. Their pasts were no longer chains, they were warnings, and they would be ready. The dawn broke over the ranch with a soft golden light, illuminating the fields that stretched endlessly into the horizon. For the first time in weeks, Grace felt a calm settle over her fragile, but real. The baby slept peacefully in her arms, his tiny hands curling around hers, and the distant hills seemed to promise safety, at least for now. Hunter or Luke, as she had come to know him, stood nearby, leaning on the fence, watching over the property. There was a quiet strength in his posture, a confidence born from years of solitude and hardship. But today, it seemed different. He was no longer just a silent protector. He had become a part of her world, a constant presence she could rely on. Grace let herself smile. "Do you ever talk?" she teased gently, brushing a strand of hair from his face. He smirked faintly, a rare expression. "Sometimes, only when it matters." She laughed softly, the sound light and warm, the first truly unguarded laugh since the train station. The baby stirred, sensing the mood, and cooed happily. Grace lifted him higher, letting his giggles echo. Across the ranch, Hunter's eyes softened as he watched them. "You've got him wrapped around your finger already," he said, a hint of pride breaking through his usual stoicism. Grace felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had no memory of who she had been, no knowledge of the past that had brought her to that lonely platform, but she did know who she was becoming, and, with Hunter by her side, she finally felt a sense of belonging. The previous dangers, the strangers in town, the shadows of her past, Colt and his threats, were still out. They're lurking somewhere beyond the hills. But for the first time, Grace didn't feel powerless. She had a name now, she had a home, and she had someone who would fight for her, no questions asked. Hunter approached, kneeling down beside her. "We'll have to make sure he's safe from now on," he said, nodding toward the baby. "And you, too." Grace nodded. "I think I'm ready for that, as long as you're with me." For the first time, Hunter didn't hesitate. He reached out and gently rested his hand on hers, a simple gesture that carried the weight of all unspoken promises. Grace felt her heart swell. "Given you a name," he said softly, "but you gave me one, too." She looked at him, puzzled. "You gave me a family," he continued, his voice low and steady. "You made me someone who matters again." Grace felt tears prick her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief and gratitude. She squeezed his hand, and "You gave me a life I can call my own, safe, whole, even if I don't remember the rest." He smiled faintly, the rarest of smiles, and finally spoke words that were more than just functional. "Then let's start fresh. Grace, you, me, and this little one." She held the baby close, rocking him gently, feeling the small, steady heart beating against hers. In that moment, everything felt right. She was no longer the nameless, abandoned woman on the train platform. She was Grace, protected, loved, and alive. And as they watched the sunrise together, their little family, small but complete, Grace realized that life didn't always need the past to define it. Sometimes, the future was enough. With Hunter at her side and the baby in her arms, she was ready to face whatever came next. Together, they would build a home filled with laughter, safety, and love. The shadows of yesterday might linger, but They no longer controlled her story. She had a name, a family, and a chance at everything she had once lost, for the first time since that lonely train station. Grace smiled freely, knowing her life had truly begun.